Iran wants to blow up Israel. Iran wants to take over the Middle East. We're 70% dependent on foreign oil. We have to secure that region of the world because next is Iran.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I'm Jon Ralston. Who are those protesters out in front of Congressman John Porter's office? We have one of the organizers and a frequent critic of the war here today on Face to Face. We talked about this war on terror, war in Iraq. Porter, when he was on the program, said there's a definite connection between the war in Iraq and the war on terror. Take a look.
The bottom line is that these folks are after our way of life, and we have not had an attack since.
You think it has anything to do with the invasion of Iraq that we haven't had an attack?
Absolutely, because
draw that nexus, prove that to me.
Because for a decade we did not respond. We've been under attack for 15 years, but we didn't respond. We're now responding.
Now, the argument that he's just scripted and he's going by his talking points, I mean, have you ever seen a better example of it than that?
You know, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know the enemy. He doesn't even know what kind of war we're in. You know, he talks about being in the trenches with the troops. John, we haven't had trench warfare since World War I. This is military operations in urban terrain. This is unconventional warfare.
But do you think those troops over there, Mr. Abinett, think that they're fighting the war on terror? Or do you think that they actually believe that?
No, they're fighting to survive every day and keep themselves alive and keep their buddy on their right alive and keep their buddy on their left alive and get through the day.
So what do they tell John Porter?
There is no connection between 911 and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
What do those troops on the line go and tell John Porter? He says he's going to Iraq maybe later this week. What are they going to tell him when he goes over there? Are they going to tell him what you just said, do you think?
No.
What are they going to tell him?
They've got careers. They don't even want to talk to politicians. You know, it puts our troops unnecessarily at risk for these guys to be pulled off the line to talk to a politician. And the only reason they send one guy back from a unit so maybe he can get some supplies for the rest of the guys in the squad. You know, these are horse and pony shows that put our troops at unnecessary risk.
Let me ask you a question about this. John Porter, I think, believes that he deserves some credit. Unlike a lot of members of Congress, this, I believe, is his 4th trip to Iraq. He's actually taken the time to go over there, find out what's really going on before he takes a position after General Petraeus' report. Isn't he doing his job?
He's delusional.
In that sense, he is. However, there's another area in which he's not doing his job, which is meeting with his constituents and also searching for a diversity of opinion. Going out to talk to enlisted men to help yourself formulate policies unusual. Our Constitution is based on different principles. We don't have a military junta. We have civilian control of the military. The soldier's job is to really follow their orders, and now that they are trapped in a quagmire that is a multi-directional religious, civil, and sectarian war, they're taking shots from all directions, and it's difficult even to say who the enemy is. A group of incredibly intelligent young men published an op-ed in the New York Times yesterday that I hope everyone reads, and I hope Mr. Porter himself seeks out some of them to speak to, called "The War as We See It." And a key sentence here is, 4 years into our occupation, we have failed in every promise, while we have substituted Ba'ath Party tyranny with a tyranny of Islamist militia and criminal violence. Well, that's 3 ways, but there must be 4 or 5 ways, because there are at least 3 or 4 sects in operation.
That was a group of soldiers who together wrote this op-ed piece in the New York Times, and they're essentially saying what I think a lot of people in America now believe, based on there not being weapons of mass destruction, that the whole mission has changed, that the reason, whatever reason we had to go in there, no longer exists.
Absolutely, and Mr. Porter keeps falling back to Saddam was a bad guy. Nobody's going to argue that. And then, as I said, it really struck me that now he's saying we're fighting that war for oil. And if he believes that's the case, that is the argument he needs to make directly to the constituents.
One of the most cynical things that goes on during any war, and you knew this in Vietnam, is this whole issue of trying to paint someone as not supporting the troops. It's a very cynical ploy that's used. It's despicable. Ted Nugent, who was a very hawkish guy, has written a lot about this. Here's what he wrote recently, the time he and fellow entertainer Toby Keith spent with wounded veterans. Historical and current evidence scrutinized is surely a good basis for opinion, but nothing quite compares to information shared by actual hands-on combatants in the front lines of the war on terror. I so respect these bright, incredibly sophisticated, gung-ho military professionals. They obviously put their hearts and souls into researching the post-9/11 world. So maybe, just maybe, their decision to volunteer stands to be more meaningful than the motives of some U.S.-bashing punk like Michael Moore and his ilk. Are you a U.S.-bashing punk like Michael Moore?
Yeah, right, John. Look, with all due respect to musicians and what they contribute to society, they don't do political military analysis, okay? You need to talk to soldiers that have been there. You need to talk to soldiers that are writing articles like this. Porter needs to get beyond his briefing book. He needs to apologize to the military families for this despicable comment, and he needs to realize that he's painted himself in a corner and be a man, stand up, come to our Take a Stand event. I want him to come to our Take a Stand event and say, I made a mistake. Not mistakes were made. President Bush made a mistake. Rice, Rumsfeld, Rove made a mistake. Cheney made a mistake, and I shouldn't have listened to him. We should have asked more questions. We should have had a just war debate.
Let me let Ms. Crawford get the last word in here. We have 30 seconds left. You're going to have this protest again on Wednesday. If he came out and invited you into his office and said, let's sit down and talk, would that satisfy you?
Well, what's going to be satisfying is to see an end to this conflict.
But what do you want Porter to do? You say you want him to end the war, et cetera.
Oh, Porter, he sits in Congress, and he's not entitled to that seat, by the way. It's time for him to begin making the case for his re-election to his constituents.
It's time to cash out.
He needs to, at a minimum, begin to work with a bipartisan majority. The Democratic leadership, aided in part by quite a few Republicans like Chuck Hagel and Walter Jones from North Carolina in the House, are going to bring more bills forward beginning in September.
That's clearly going to happen. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're out of time after General Petraeus' report. Really appreciate your coming on. Keep us informed of what you're doing. We'll have you back. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.
All right.